I love young adults. Like, honestly, it's like such a blessing to be a part of it. Like, seriously, like since the beginning, like I've always seen Steven and Lindsay around. Like, no, you're good. It's been a blessing to see the way that like God has really grown this ministry. Like, I feel like it was similar to like this room full of people, and now it's grown to be just like we're filling the chapel, and it's like it's so cool. And I think like a big part of that is just the way that like young adults have really used their gifts to bless this ministry, and they've kind of used their gifts to serve and to uplift like our community and our church in a way. And I think that's super cool. So I kind of want to start by kind of talking about what I do, kind of like introing just a little bit about me, and then we'll jump into kind of talking about gifts and how just open up a conversation about that. But I'm going to start with some prayer, and then we'll get started. So Jesus, we just thank you for this day, God. We thank you just for what you're doing in this church and through your people. God, I thank you that, Lord, you did the work for us, and God, you've given us tools and gifts to be able to serve you, and given us tools and gifts to help us just be faithful. So God, I pray that you would just, Lord, be in this room today. God, I pray that this would not be about me, but Lord, that you would just, Lord, receive the glory, that we would just be better stewards of what you've given us. In your name, amen. All right, cool. So presentation time. I like visual things, so I like kind of showing things on a screen, and it's fun. So this is just a little bit of my work. Yo, Jake, who are you, my guy? That's a great question presentation slide. Thanks for asking. Did any of you guys use SparkNotes in like high school? SparkNotes, see, you know. So I'll give the SparkNotes version because we don't have like that much time. But 2017, right? All right, I'm balling up. I'm like super passionate about basketball, played it all throughout high school. And then I found out I wasn't going to make the NBA. And like, I know, shocker, right? But that led to kind of two avenues of like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my time? And part of that was like, maybe let's pursue vocational ministry. I was doing like on-campus ministry. I was heavily involved in like youth group and things like that. And on the other side, like I was also spending time creating videos and kind of doing creative stuff. And so I was like, creativity, vocational ministry. And so my heart was kind of torn, and yet like I feel like God just kind of opened up this avenue to like pursue creativity. And I realized later on that a lot of what I wanted to do, I was able to do through just serving my church. And so I thank God for like that kind of freedom. But yeah, chose creativity. This was end of high school. This was, I think, when we like hit the folks, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, we'll move on. So in college, I'm sort of figuring out creativity. Like I'm making videos. I'm trying to figure out like what lane to pick. And so I met Jeff. He's a big mentor of mine. I work with him, work with Steven. And Jeff really poured into me and kind of showed me just like what's possible with art and things like that. So I made videos for him. And then he pushed me to do stuff within music, which was like what I was passionate about as well, like documenting music. And I've done stuff with Isaiah right here. Thanks for coming, bro. And so I followed a band and kind of did tour videography. And then I wanted to like see what would it look like to put on an event. So I kind of incorporated design and marketing to do my own show. So I've kind of like worn a lot of hats and like tried a lot of different things. And I think it's like taught me and grown me in many ways. So 2021, I did it. I graduated. I did the thing. And so we're just going to... All right, okay. So now I'm in official business, which is super cool, praise God. And I help bands and brands through video. That's kind of what I do. And so that's the SparkNotes gist of me. But this talk isn't necessarily about me. It's just more to give you some context. But I'm super passionate about creativity in business and honestly gifts. Like I think like every one of you in this room like has a gift and has like tools that God has given you. And I think like it's on you guys to like steward that and to use that to serve other people. So I don't necessarily have answers for you tonight. I more just want to open up a conversation about like what does that actually look like in our lives to do these things. So, all right. So a quick story. Excuse me, man. Water, right? It's good for you. So I'm talking with a close friend one time. Excuse me, and I asked him like, what is something you don't like about me? Like this was a homie who would just like tell me straight. And I was like, he thought about it for a second and he told me, you know what, Jake, like something you do really well is like you surround yourself with people who are like older and wiser than you, and you just like absorb. You're like a sponge, and you take all those things in. You take in wisdom, you take in the knowledge that's been given to you. But what a waste it would be if you didn't like pour yourself out onto other people. And I was like, dang. And I think that really hit me because I saw like the danger of like what I was doing in my life. Like it was really like selfish in a way of like, it's really good to like grow, and it's really good to like kind of take in wisdom. But if you're not outpouring that, like it's kind of like, it seems like a waste. Like you're being really selfish with it. And so this has kind of been like a mentality like I've kind of learned within gifting, within discipleship, right? Like it's good to be discipled, but it's also good to disciple other people. It's a blessing to receive the gospel, but it's also a blessing to give the gospel to other people. It's, that's kind of like the cycle of like, I think what it means to be a sponge. And so this has kind of been like a mantra in my own life that I've kind of used to think about what I do, I guess. But kind of thinking about this year, my big word for the year is serve. And it comes from just like reading this passage in 1 Peter. And it says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And I think what's so cool is like, when we read this, it says whatever gift you have received. And it doesn't say like, if you've received a gift, it's like, no, like you've received something, like you ought to use those things. And I think it's cool to look at like the two examples is to serve others and to be faithful stewards. And I think there's something to that. I think when we look at like the word serve, that means to give of yourself. And I think being stewards is kind of like cultivating and giving that your all. And so like I'm super passionate about like this verse, and it's kind of been a big help for me in just kind of thinking of a theme of what I'm doing within my work. So give, serve, stewards, good, arrows, cool. So this is kind of like the 2 points I kind of want to touch on today. And so, Jake, what are my gifts? That's a good question. This is friend. I just thought like that's a good name for him, friend. Like he's like friendly. I don't know, but those are my friends. And he's got a good question. I think like when it comes to gifts, I think we first start with like, okay, like what are my gifts? And I think for some people that's pretty easy. It's like what you do. And for others, it's kind of just like this constant like search, like what am I good at? And so I think like within that, like think about like what are your gifts? And I would start with some of these questions, like what do people say I'm good at? And what do people say I'm bad at? Like start with your community, your church, your friends, your family. Like think about like what do people say about you? When my homie was like, bro, you don't like pour out onto other people. Like that was something where I'm like, oh, that's something like really helpful for me to think about like ways to improve. And in the same way, like it's just helpful to ask your friends like hard questions and allow them to really like tell you straight out of love, of course. Like, and I think that will help you to discover some of your giftings. Where am I serving in church? If you guys like don't know where your gifts are, there's like a million ministries like even in this church that you could just like you could pick one every week for like the next year and probably like find something you like or something you're good at. Like it takes kind of like a little bit of like effort like to go out and like try those things, but I think it's good to like start like at your church in a community where help is needed and for you to do that. Have I prayed about it? That's a great question. Like go to the Lord. Have I given it my best effort? Again, just kind of like thinking like, have you tried? And yeah, what do I do in my free time? Like all of you guys have interests and things you enjoyed like on your own time, and so that's just something to think about when it comes to gifts. So again, point number 1, share your gifts. I think like if nothing else, like God has given us these gifts to use, right? Like what a waste it would be if like we've been given a gift and we just kind of tuck it away in the corner and like it just sits there. Like you guys don't do that with like Christmas gifts and like things like that, but like a gift was meant to be like used, and if nothing else, like God has like given you gifts, and like a way of praise is just to use them. And so there's my friend Trevor helped me with some of these illustrations, but kind of like quote of my life has been like ceaseless praise, like constantly thinking about like how am I bringing praise into the Lord in video, in the way like I communicate like at home, like all these different things in my life, like how am I giving praise? Like it's constant praise unto the Lord. And this comes like from a really cool hymn, but anyway, ceaseless praise. Like if nothing else, like just use your gifts to give praise to God. Your what and your why. This has kind of like helped me in thinking about just like why do I do the things that I do, in thinking about gifts. And I've got this from a comedian. His name's Michael Jr. And the way he talks about comedy, he talks about like your what and your why. So your what is kind of like one trajectory of your life. It's what you do. Some of you guys are students, musicians, artists. Some of you play basketball. Whatever it is, like you have something kind of going on in your rhythms of life. And I think it's important to know that those things can change, right? Like looking back at high school, like it wasn't going to be the NBA, so it was going to be something else. And like for a little bit, it was being a student, and now it's being a videographer. So, but like, who knows? The videography like business could just tank one day, and I gotta like go find a job at Target, and like I could end up as a Target manager, and like so be it. Like if it's being a janitor in Zimbabwe or like whatever it is, like your what can like always change. But what's important is like your why. Your why is like why you do what you do. It's like your purpose. And so understanding like if nothing else, like my why is to know God and to make him known. And that's something for me that has changed my life, and something that like doesn't come out of the picture no matter what context I'm in. So kind of thinking about like your what and your why is really just figuring out like what is the sweet spot, like where am I incorporating Jesus into what I do in my life. And I think like that's a really hard challenge. It's like a journey, but it's important to understand that it's a journey, and it's not going to come overnight, but it kind of takes doing the hard things to get there. It kind of takes like serving in 10 ministries to figure out like, all right, what are my gifts are, or like meeting with a bunch of people over coffee to just ask questions, being discipling other people. And I think that's where you kind of find like in the journey, like where does God have me? And so, all right, in recap, my what is my identity. No, that's not true. So this is really like important. Like I think we miss the mark like so often, because even for me, like I love what I do, but like that can easily like become like a crutch, like a distraction in understanding like my purpose, like why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's important to understand like your what is a title. It's the way that you use your gifts. Your why is your purpose. It's why you use your gifts. And so that's really important to think about when it comes to serving other people. So on to Steward. I love this little happy face. He's so fun. All right, let's bring it back to before college. I needed a job, and I applied to Starbucks. I applied to all these places. And Albertsons was the only one that got back to me. I was like, it is what it is. And I signed up to be like a bag boy. I applied, and I go into my interview, and the lady's like super confident, like, you got the job. But she looked me in the eye, and she's like, you would be really good in the meat department, in the butcher block. And I was like, all right, I just need a job. And she's like, it'll pay like 20 more cents an hour. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll do it. It was the worst job ever. Like, I'm telling you, I hated this job so much. I don't know if you guys have even thought about like what goes on like in the back of like the butcher block, but it's gross. It's just like cleaning out meat and coming home smelling like fish every night, and just being sad. I don't know, like it's not a good job. I wouldn't recommend it. But the one thing about this job is it taught me kind of like the grind of like a job. And I was washing dishes. I was thinking like, man, what do I really want to be doing with my time right now? And this job like honestly changed my life in many ways. And I like go back to the same Albertsons, like if my mom asked me to bring something home or whatever. And I just like constantly am reminded about like, man, like look at like kind of the season like God put me through, but like, man, look at the season now where like God has really grown me and brought me along this journey to figure out like my giftings. And so I hope that's like an encouragement to you to know like, man, you might be working in the butcher block right now, and like nothing against that. I'm just saying like I know that like God has like more potential for you guys in your life, but it's a journey to get there, and it's a lot of prayer and a lot of just grind. And so when we talk about like stewarding our gifts, I think some of like that idea is really just like giving things your all. I think like people look at our generation like friend a little bit, like it's like older people look at us and think like, man, we have no work ethic, like we're not disciplined. And I hate the way that like kind of older people like perceive youth sometimes. Like we're young adults and we have so much more potential than people like kind of think of like our generation sometimes. Like I want our generation to be like the generation that like changes the world in many ways, that like tells people about Jesus. I want our generation to be like people that cultivate like amazing things like for the kingdom. And I don't think it has to be like this or the way that like people perceive it. But it takes like us kind of like rallying around that. The way that I feel like I've been able to see firsthand, like God used young adults in this ministry to rally around this ministry, and for that to kind of grow to be like what it is today. Like in many ways, like we have to like be the ones to be disciplined and motivated to like do the work, like whatever it is. And so these are just a couple thoughts I had in terms of like, man, what does it look like? And I think like these are kind of like to the point, but I think sometimes like we don't think about like these things. Like sometimes we just like need it like straightforward. So when like hard things happen, persevere. Like, no duh. But like, yes, like isn't it true? It's like cliche, but it's so true. Like, man, like working the meat department job, like it just takes like persevering, but like hard things aren't necessarily bad things. Like I think sometimes that we feel like we deserve to see the fruit of our labor always. And I think like it's not always the case. Like sometimes we'll never get the chance to see that fruit, but it doesn't mean like our labor is in vain. And so like do hard things. Like sometimes it's good for you. Learn to be disciplined. I think like in our spiritual walk, in our professional lives, like discipline is so important. And I think it's something like that we really need to take seriously in our lives if we want to grow. Proverbs talks about like for godliness, pursue discipline. And it's just like, man, like if I want to grow in my relationship with the Lord, if I'm being honest, like, and I think like some of us can be honest in this room, like I don't always love reading my Bible. That doesn't mean it's not good for me. It doesn't mean I don't care about it. It just means, man, like there are days where I don't feel like reading my Bible, but I gotta like put in that work because I know it's good for me. I know that good fruit will come from it. I know that God will use that. But it takes like the decision, the discipline to do those things. Set an example, like 1 Timothy, I think it's on the next slide, but let no one despise your youth, but set an example. And I think like this idea that like the people around you are also watching you. So if you're the one like stewarding your gifts, serving, using your gifts to serve other people, like people are watching whether you realize that or not. And it's just like, it's good to have that mindset, like set an example. Exceed the expectations of your employer. I think that's just like going above and beyond. Like giving things your all doesn't mean doing what's required of you. It means like doing it exhaustively, like doing it with praise, like more than what's required of you. I think like that honors God. Like I just think like there's something to that. And learning to enjoy the process. Again, it's a journey, and everything I've kind of shared thus far is just to say like, man, like I've struggled, I've like blown it over and over, but God has kind of brought me along this journey to kind of figure out like what are my gifts and like how am I using these gifts to serve others, to serve Him, and how am I giving my all in these circumstances. This is a great quote. I think excellence honors God and inspires people. So as we learn to steward these gifts, like just understand like excellence is a way to like glorify the Lord, like doing not what's required of you, but going above and beyond. Like this is like God honoring, and I think it gets people's attention enough to honestly like see like God in us, if that makes sense. Like I think like it draws attention for us to have a platform and an opportunity to bring the gospel, to bring Jesus into the lives of others. And so I think that's like super important. 1 Timothy, great verse. Steward, definition of steward, if it's any help to you guys, utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and the betterment of His creation. So when I read this, like I really thought like using like giving it your all, like doing like exhaustive work with your gifts, like for the betterment of His creation. Like that's when I think of the word steward, I just kind of like thought of it like that. But again, just kind of in summary, like share your gifts. It requires giving up yourself. having like a body around you to like help you with your pride and to honestly just like give of your time, your resources to serve the church, to serve other people. And stewarding your gifts requires giving your all. It requires like a little bit of a grind. It requires sacrifice, but ultimately I think it honors the Lord. So those are some thoughts. Thanks, yo. This is my Instagram if you want to check it out and what I do. But I'm super passionate. Like I was even talking to my sister the other night about, she wants to make like tote bags, and I like want to support her in that. So like my life, I just want to like kind of encourage and build other people up in whatever it is they're doing. Typically it's in creativity, but like that doesn't have to be the limit. So if you guys have like questions, I'd love to like open that up. Like if you guys have anything that comes to mind. If not, I got stickers up here. You can take 1 or 12 or whatever you feel. But if not, I don't know what the dessert peach cobbler sounds fire. It sounds good. But you guys had a lot of options for talks and you came to mind, so I just want to say thank you and appreciate you guys for being here. So. Thanks. Cool. Is there any questions before we eat dessert? Cool. I didn't have any either.